Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of TOI Business Bytes. Today we have with us Naina Lal Kidwai. She is Chairperson of Rothschild India, and she is going to take us through what India needs to do for the China Plus One strategy, and in the long term, how do we become the default manufacturing hub of this world? Hi ma'am.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Thank you ma'am. My first question to you is that, how has the PLI scheme helped in pitching India as a manufacturing destination?
So the PLI scheme is actually a very interesting way for the government to not just mouth platitudes about how we want to become an electronics hub, how we want to replace phones, imports with manufacture here to be able to export some of these products, but it's actually put its money where its mouth is, so to speak, by saying these PLI schemes, we will give tax incentives, support, land. These are priorities for us. And I think the most significant part of the PLI scheme is the government showing its hand and support for certain sectors. And in fact, as they've clarified, that they're not stopping at the ones that have been announced, and they will continue to look at these areas. For industry, this becomes very exciting, not just domestic industry, but foreign investment is looking at some of these programs. And I think we're seeing that success in terms of the companies that have come forward to invest in India through the PLI schemes in the areas and categories which the government has defined. All of this is the China Plus One strategy, which the world is looking at. So I firmly believe that we aren't, or no one can replace China. And I would imagine at best, what we may see is supplies which would be 70% Chinese, 30% rest of the world, countries like India, for products which China had the monopoly, if not the 100% supply. Now, the key here is for Indian companies to be competitive. Are we going to be able to offer the same price as China? And here, I hear from companies, international companies, that they're willing to even tolerate a somewhat higher price from India because they're so keen about India, Vietnam, other alternate suppliers in their China Plus One strategies in order to encourage supply.
Okay. The government has announced the production-linked incentive scheme for around 14 sectors. What are the other sectors that you think that they should focus on to get the China Plus One strategy right?
There are many green products which will require attention. Some of the renewable spaces have. So I think we have to look very carefully at the products which, on the one hand, fulfill domestic demand and which we were importing. And significant amongst those, other than our fossil oil a program which absolutely needs sorting out, which is why renewables, green hydrogen, all this becomes important. But the key imports for us, electronics and electrical goods, that continues. So I think thrust on products that we can manufacture in India for India and thereafter in India for other countries, but decidedly and definitely picking up those that first cater to domestic demand would be very important. And frankly, it's not all about PLI either. I think once companies, whether Indian or foreign, realize that doing business in India is easy, we won't need PLI schemes. So The overarching message has to be, okay, we are helping with all this right now to show direction, and it's been important. But you look at our ease of doing business, whether it's an index, whatever, we've done well. But are we where we want to be? No. Do we have to continue to address the issues that remain? Absolutely. We've also looked at 300 plus reforms across 72 action points for state governments to develop investor-friendly ecosystem. And that again is very important because the interaction of companies happens at the state level. And the third very important area that the government's embarked on is the 40,000 plus compliances which were reduced to improve the industrial ecosystem. Lowering logistic costs is critical because our logistics cost is about 5 times more for products than it is for our neighboring countries. So even if labor is competitive and good in the factory, we lose that advantage just moving the product. out of the factory and to ports and to the market.
Okay. Are there any other policy hurdles that you think that need to be addressed?
Oh, heck, there are lots of policy hurdles. I think at each level, whether for each industry, there are things which need streamlining. Much of it actually exists at the state level. And you can see that in terms of the states that are getting it right and investment goes there, and the states that aren't, and they will continue to be laggards. So the competition between states, which was an excellent program that Niti Aayog started, is very well worth it, because that company that wants to come to India, companies come here in order to access the domestic market and then go out. And I think the success of Apple is really there to see with the $1 billion export in December. And that $1 billion has meant that Apple has managed to sort out its supply chain in India, which may not be Indian companies. I understand they brought some of their suppliers, including from China, into India in order to manufacture here, supply to them so that they could manufacture, assemble here, and then sell. And so they're now exporting from India. When an Apple, with its nitty-gritty attention to detail, does this, other electronic companies sit up and take note. And I do believe that the one success story provides a multiplier effect for others to follow. The investment is good because it will earn us money. It will definitely provide jobs. But the ratio of jobs to the capex spent historically will change, in that it will be fewer higher end jobs where manual labor and the nature of work that we need to absorb the mass of people coming through our system is where we will need tourism, where we need the service sectors, we need real estate and buildings and some of those areas as critical to absorb the otherwise high unemployment we would see. And therefore, the skill levels we need for these higher end sectors, the engineers, etc., which India has, but we need to skill them to be able to take charge of this new manufacturing norm, particularly these foreign companies that are now setting up in India will require, so that we don't begin to have a spiraling of high labor costs as a result.
So, ma'am, you spoke of exports, of smartphones out of India. In that regards, and not just for smartphones, what should be the overall export strategy to push the manufacturing sector in the country?
So, competitiveness. How can we ensure that everything we manufacture is competitive at a global level? Otherwise, we are only as good as that first subsidy we get, and the minute that's yanked away, we lose out to our competition. Right. And to be competitive, we have to be proficient at what we do in terms of manufacture and the output. But we also need an ecosystem that helps us be competitive. And that is where the logistics costs come in. That is where the cost of interest and money comes in. Having access to enough money through the liquidity in the system, and more important, what is that interest cost at which I can borrow and access the money, at availability of equity, the capital markets, different products, all of that bucket of finance is very important for us. Now, the good news is our banks are now finally in reasonable condition. There is focus now on our bond markets and ability to raise longer tenured money, because banks typically have lent 5 years. With difficulty, they get to 7 years. A new company may need 10 years money. And for that, we need the bond markets. So different instruments, focus on our capital markets becomes very important in terms of that finance. And of course, venture capital, etc., for the startup universe. So sheer mass of skill we need. The fact that prices of people and this kind of engineer support from the middle level up is the costs and prices are only going up, suggests that there is a shortage developing, and we have to very quickly move into skilling for the jobs that we are now looking to place. And I would just say, at a central level and policy, making these companies, making industry feel that they are a priority, that they're not the stepchild of growth, right. That they are central to India's strategy to celebrate their successes, and to clean up the compliance burdens, which are making industry very risk averse, it is not a bad decision. The US is littered with stories of bankruptcies, not by people who committed fraud, but they just made the wrong business decision or got caught in a downturn.
Will eventually India, is there a realistic chance for India to eventually have a major chunk of the world's manufacturing, will it ever be able to overtake China or at least be on par with China?
Yeah. Look, we are too early in this journey because I believe we lost the plot on manufacturing. The services sector soared. Manufacturing in India has not been a great story over the last 30 years, actually. We've seen more industries shut down and vanish than we have seen established at scale. So we are starting at a very low level. We lost the whole journey on textiles, which shifted to Bangladesh, which does far more textile export than India does for a variety of reasons. So we have a long ways to go. Are we going to be the ones that grab the share from China? I would like to believe we are going to have more than a fighting chance and a very good chance at grabbing some of that manufacturing that is required to diversify away from China. But there are other countries that are dreaming about the same dream that we have of doing it. And they've been doing a pretty good job of it. The Indonesias, Malaysias, Vietnam, Philippines, they're there too, with a lot of the advantages that we have to offer. Our advantage, to my mind, is the biggest. We have skills, we have people, we have a huge market which some of these countries do not have. So if we hold out the carrot of our market for these products, which then pushes these companies to come just in order to grab the Indian market because we kind of make it difficult for them to just import or even just assemble in India. That then forces them to begin to manufacture here. But I would like to believe that manufacturing will happen at a globally competitive price. You and I should not be having to pay more for an AC or a fridge made in India or a car made in India. Yeah, we should be paying less because it's having to travel far less to get to us. So that's where the competitiveness of what we do comes in. It is logistics that's then done from end to end, that we are always measuring. How long is it taking for a truck to move, for the rail container to move, etc. So these are what will create the government's ecosystem. It is some things that I think are very easy to fix. Like I feel the tax stuff is very easy to fix, whereas roads and all will take a little more time. And in my view, only maybe 30% of that supply chain will move away from China, where China's 100%. Of that 30%, are we going to get the entire 30? There are others competing for it. But a good start would be that we get, at least half, if not more, of that 30. So we have a long way to go. And in every sector, there will be an opportunity for us to look at stepping up our game, provided we can be long-term competitive.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. As you said, let's hope that India is able to capture this. India is actually able to be competitive. We are able to solve our policy hurdles, so that if not the default manufacturing, destination, at least for China +1 for companies, we become a major manufacturing hub. Thank you.